The rain-soaked streets of downtown Atlanta glistened under the neon lights as a figure emerged from the shadows. Dressed in worn jeans, a faded jacket, and scuffed boots that had seen better days, he moved with quiet purpose through the bustling financial district. The irony was lost on everyone around him. Here, in the heart of American capitalism, where million-dollar deals were struck over handshakes, walked a man whose net worth could buy entire city blocks. Yet not a single soul recognized him. The storm had been merciless that morning, and his usual driver had called in sick. So Marcus Hamilton, worth $4.2 billion and owner of Hamilton Enterprises, found himself walking the streets like any ordinary citizen. The expensive suit he'd planned to wear hung pristine in his penthouse closet, while he wore clothes he grabbed from his emergency bag. Sometimes, life has a way of stripping away all pretense. As he approached the gleaming glass facade of Meridian Cafe, one of Atlanta's most exclusive coffee shops, Marcus paused. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, he could see the usual crowd: investment bankers in $1,000 suits, tech entrepreneurs with their MacBooks, socialites discussing their weekend in the Hamptons. This was his world. Or at least, it used to be before he learned what really mattered. The brass handles felt cold against his weathered hands as he pushed open the doors. The warm aroma of imported Colombian coffee and fresh pastries enveloped him, but so did something else. The immediate shift in atmosphere. Conversations didn't stop, but voices lowered to whispers. Eyes followed his every move with barely concealed disdain. Marcus had experienced this before, during his undercover visits to his various businesses. But today felt different. Today, he wasn't here as an owner conducting surprise inspections. Today, he was simply a man who wanted coffee and perhaps a glimpse of humanity in its rawest form. He joined the line behind a woman clutching an Hermes bag worth more than most people's monthly salary. She glanced back once, her nose wrinkling slightly before she stepped forward, creating an obvious gap between them. The message was clear: maintain your distance. Behind the counter, Sarah Chun, a 23-year-old part-time student working to pay her way through law school, noticed a newcomer immediately. In her 18 months at Meridian Cafe, she developed a sixth sense about customers. The regulars, the tourists, the business deals, the first dates. She could read them all. But this man in worn clothes, standing among Atlanta's elite, he didn't belong, and Sarah felt familiar irritation rising in her chest. The line moved slowly, giving Marcus time to observe. A group of young professionals at corner table were loudly discussing their cryptocurrency investments, their voices carrying that particular arrogance that comes with new money. An older gentleman near the window was berating someone over the phone about quarterly projections, completely oblivious to the other customers. And at a small table by the wall sat a young black mother with her 8-year-old daughter, Zoe, who was quietly coloring while her mother worked on a laptop. Next, Sarah's voice cut through the ambient noise. Marcus stepped forward, offering a gentle smile. "Good morning. Could I please have a medium dark roast and one of those blueberry muffins?" Sarah's eyes swept over him dismissively. The frayed edges of his jacket, the worn sneakers, the hair that clearly hadn't seen an expensive stylist. Her smile was professional but cold. "That'll be $18.50. Without hesitation, Marcus reached for his wallet and produced a Platinum American Express card, the kind reserved for individuals with 8-figure net worths. The metal card caught the light as he handed it over, but Sarah barely glanced at it as she swiped it through the reader. The machine beeped once, twice, then displayed a message that would change everything. Declined. Sarah's eyebrows rose slightly as she tried the card again. Another decline. She looked up at Marcus with barely concealed satisfaction. "Sir, your card's being declined. Do you have another form of payment?" What Sarah didn't know, what none of them could know, was that Marcus's bank had temporarily frozen his accounts that morning due to unusual activity. His finance team was in the middle of a major acquisition, and the automated security systems had flagged the massive transfers. It was a glitch that would be resolved within hours. But for now, one of America's wealthiest men couldn't buy a cup of coffee. Marcus felt a familiar knot form in his stomach, not from embarrassment about the money. He had enough cash in various accounts to buy the entire cafe chain 10 times over. The knot came from anticipation, from knowing exactly what was about to unfold. He'd seen the scene play out countless times in his undercover visits to his businesses, but never as a target. "That's strange," he said quietly, reaching for his wallet again. "Could you try once more?" Sarah made no effort to lower her voice as she swiped the card a third time. "Sir, it's declined again. Are you sure this is your card?" The question carried an unmistakable implication, and several customers turned to watch. The cafe's ambient chatter began to fade as more people noticed a commotion. Marcus remained calm, though something deep in his chest began to tighten. "Yes, it's my card. There might be a system issue. Or maybe," Sarah interrupted, her voice rising slightly, "you should try ordering something more within your budget. We have some day-old pastries for $3. A ripple of nervous laughter spread through the nearby customers. The woman with the Hermes bag shook her head in disgust and moved to a different table. The group of young professionals had stopped their conversation entirely, their attention now fixed on the drama unfolding at the counter. Marcus looked down at the card in his hand, a piece of metal that could access more wealth than most small countries possessed. Yet here, in this moment, it was worthless, more than worthless. It was evidence of his humiliation. "I understand the card isn't working," he said, his voice steady despite the heat rising in his cheeks. "But I assure you, there's simply been a mistake. Look, sir," Sarah's tone grew sharper, emboldened by the audience and her growing certainty that she was dealing with someone trying to scam the system. "I've seen plenty of fake cards, and your little performance isn't fooling anyone. Maybe you should head down the street to the McDonald's where they take cash." The words hit Marcus like physical blows. Around him, the cafe's atmosphere had completely shifted. What had been quiet observation was now open hostility. Phones appeared in hands, cameras discreetly pointing in his direction. In the corner, he noticed a young girl, Zoe, looking up from her coloring book with wide, concerned eyes. At a table near the window, 19-year-old Instagram influencer Madison Brooks had been live streaming her morning routine when she noticed commotion. With 2.3 million followers hungry for content, she immediately pivoted her stream toward the unfolding drama. "Oh my God, guys," she whispered into her phone, making sure her voice was loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "I'm witnessing the most cringe thing right now. This homeless-looking guy is trying to use what's obviously a fake credit card to buy coffee at Meridian. Like the audacity." Her followers' comments began flooding in, encouraging her to get closer, to expose the scammer. Madison felt the intoxicating rush that came with viral content, the kind that could gain her hundreds of thousands of new followers overnight. "Sir," Sarah said, her voice now carrying the authority of righteous indignation, "you're holding up the line and disturbing our other customers. If you can't pay for your order, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Marcus felt the walls of the cafe closing in around him. Every eye was upon him, every whisper a dagger to his dignity. But beneath the humiliation, something else stirred, a profound sadness for what he was witnessing. These people, his people, had become so consumed with appearances, so quick to judge, so eager to kick someone when they appear to be down. "I understand your position," he said quietly, pocketing the declined card. "But I'm not trying to deceive anyone. Perhaps I could speak with your manager about this situation." Sarah's laugh was sharp and unforgiving. "The manager? You want to waste even more of our time? Fine." She turned toward the back office, her voice carrying clearly across the now silent cafe. "David, can you come out here? We have a situation." David Martinez had been managing Meridian Cafe for 3 years, working his way up from barista to shift supervisor to his current position. At 35, he prided himself on running a tight ship, maintaining the upscale atmosphere that kept their wealthy clientele coming back. When he emerged from the office and saw the scene at the counter, his assessment was immediate and decisive. The man in worn clothes stood out like a stain on the cafe's pristine image. Around him, David could see the discomfort of their regular customers, the very people whose loyalty and high-dollar orders kept the cafe profitable. The choice was simple: protect the brand and the customers who mattered, or coddle someone who clearly didn't belong. "Sir," David said, approaching with the confident stride of someone accustomed to handling unpleasant situations, "I understand there's been an issue with payment. Marcus turned to face the manager, hoping for a more reasonable conversation. Yes, my card seems to be having some technical difficulties. I was hoping we could work something out, or perhaps I could provide some identification to verify. I think the situation is pretty clear, David interrupted, his tone polite but firm. If you can't pay for your order, we can't serve you. And frankly, your presence here is making our other customers uncomfortable. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Marcus felt something crack inside his chest, not his pride, but his faith in basic human decency. Around him, he could hear the subtle sounds of agreement. Throat clearings, murmured conversations, the scratch of chair legs as people positioned themselves for a better view of his humiliation. Madison had moved closer now, her phone capturing every moment of what she was already mentally titling, "Fake rich guy gets exposed at fancy cafe." Her followers were eating it up, the viewer count climbing rapidly as the drama unfolded. "You know what?" she said loudly, making sure her voice carried to her live stream. "I've seen this before. Homeless people trying to scam their way into places they don't belong. Someone should call the police." The suggestion rippled to the crowd like wildfire. Suddenly, everyone had an opinion. Someone mentioned seeing similar scams on the news. Another person worried about safety. A third suggested that this was exactly what was wrong with the city. People who didn't know their place causing problems for everyone else. Marcus stood in the center of it all, a man worth billions being treated like a common criminal, and for a moment, he felt the overwhelming urge to reveal everything. To pull out his phone and call his assistant, to have his legal team contact the cafe's corporate headquarters, to watch these people's faces transform when they realized who they were humiliating. But something held him back. Perhaps it was curiosity about how far this would go. Perhaps it was a test of his own character. Or perhaps it was the sight of that little girl, Zoe, who continued to watch with wide eyes that held none of the cruelty he saw in the adult faces around him. "I don't want any trouble," Marcus said quietly, his voice almost lost in the growing murmur of the crowd. "I just wanted some coffee." "Well, maybe you should have thought of that before trying to run a scam," Sarah shot back, emboldened by the support she felt from the room. "David, should I call security?" David nodded curtly. "I think that would be best." "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises immediately, or we'll have to involve law enforcement." The humiliation was complete now. Marcus could feel it pressing down on him from all sides. The stares, the whispers, the barely concealed satisfaction of people who felt superior watching someone else's downfall. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the sheer emotional weight of witnessing humanity at its ugliest. But then, cutting through the noise like a bell, came a small voice. "Mama," 8-year-old Zoe whispered, tugging on her mother's sleeve. "Why are they being mean to that man?" Lisa Washington looked up from her laptop, taking in the scene with growing discomfort. She'd been only half listening to commotion while trying to finish a project proposal, but her daughter's question forced her to really see what was happening. A man, clearly down on his luck, was being publicly humiliated by a crowd of people who should know better. The same people who posted on social media about kindness and compassion were now delighting in someone else's embarrassment. Lisa felt a familiar ache in her chest, the same one she felt countless times when she and Zoe had been on the receiving end of similar treatment. "Some people forget how to be kind, baby," she whispered back, but Zoe wasn't satisfied with that answer. The little girl looked at the man again, really looked at him. While everyone else saw torn clothes and a declined credit card, Zoe saw something different. She saw the way he held himself, not hunched with defeat, but straight with quiet dignity. She saw how he spoke politely even when others were rude. She saw the sadness in his eyes that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with disappointment in people. At 8 years old, Zoe Washington had already learned more about struggle than many adults would ever know. She watched her mother work 3 jobs to pay for law school. She'd eaten cereal for dinner when rent was due. She'd worn clothes from thrift stores and learned to be grateful for hand-me-downs. But she'd also learned something else, that the size of your heart mattered more than the size of your wallet. While the adults around her competed to see who could be cruelest, Zoe made a decision that would change everything. She stood up from her table, her small hand clutching the 5 crumpled dollar bills her mother had given her for lunch. The money wasn't much. Certainly not enough for the expensive coffee and muffin the man had ordered, but it was everything she had. "Mama," she said quietly, "I want to help him." Lisa's heart clenched as she realized what her daughter intended to do. "Sweetheart, maybe we should stay out of—" But Zoe was already walking toward the counter, her small figure moving through the crowd of adults like a ship cutting through troubled waters. Conversations faltered as people noticed the little girl approaching the scene. Phones turned to follow her movement, including Madison's live stream. Marcus saw her coming and felt something shift in his chest. In the midst of all this adult cruelty, here was a child moving with purpose and compassion. He watched as she approached the counter, her small hand extended with the wrinkled bills. "Excuse me," Zoe said in her clear, 8-year-old voice that somehow carried across the entire cafe. "He can have my lunch money." The silence that followed was deafening. Madison's phone captured the moment perfectly. The little girl with her outstretched hand, the adults frozen in various poses of shock and shame, and Marcus, whose eyes had filled with tears that had nothing to do with his earlier humiliation. Sarah stared down at the child, then at the $5 being offered. Around them, the cafe had gone completely quiet. Even the espresso machine seemed to have paused in respect for what had just happened. "Sweetie," Sarah said, her voice softened now but still carrying an edge of irritation. "This isn't your problem. Go back to your mother." But Zoe didn't move. She looked up at Marcus with those wise 8-year-old eyes and smiled. "My mama says when someone needs help, you help them. That's what good people do." The words hit the crowd like a physical force. Here was a child who clearly had less than any of them, offering what little she had to help a stranger. The contrast between her innocence and their cruelty was stark and undeniable. Marcus knelt down slowly, bringing himself to Zoe's eye level. When he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "That's very kind of you, sweetheart. But I can't take your lunch money." "Why not?" Zoe asked with a directness that only children possess. "You're hungry, right? And they're being mean because you don't have money. So here's some money." Around them, adults began to shift uncomfortably. The simple logic of the child had cut through all their justifications and exposed the ugly truth of what they'd been doing. Madison's live stream comments had changed tone completely. Her followers were no longer encouraging cruelty, but demanding to know why none of the adults were helping. Marcus reached out and gently closed Zoe's small fist around the money. "You keep that for your lunch. But thank you. Thank you for reminding me that there's still goodness in this world." Just then, Marcus's phone buzzed with text message. He glanced at it and smiled for the first time that morning. The message was from his head of security. "Sir, the bank situation has been resolved. Also, we've been monitoring the social media situation at Meridian Cafe. Should we intervene?" Marcus looked around the cafe, at Sarah behind the counter, at David the manager standing smugly nearby, at Madison still filming, at the crowd of people who had delighted in his humiliation. Then he looked down at Zoe, whose act of kindness had just reminded him why he'd gotten into business in the first place. Not for money, but to make a difference. He typed back quickly, "Send the regional director to Meridian Cafe immediately, and get me the corporate contact for that influencer's management company." "What's happening?" Zoe asked, noticing his sudden change in demeanor. Marcus smiled down at her, and for the first time that morning, it was a smile that reached his eyes. "Justice, sweetheart. Justice is what's happening." He stood up and pulled out his phone again, this time dialing a number that would be familiar to anyone who worked in Atlanta's restaurant industry. The phone rang twice before a voice answered. "Janet Morrison, Regional Director of Operations." "Janet, it's Marcus Hamilton." The effect of those 4 words was immediate and electric. David, who had been close enough to hear, went pale. Sarah, still behind the counter, looked confused but noticed her manager's sudden panic. "Mr. Hamilton." "Sir, I didn't know you were. Where are you calling from?" "I'm standing in the Meridian Cafe on Peachtree Street," Marcus said, his voice carrying clearly across the now silent room. "And I think we need to have a conversation about customer service standards." "I'll be there in 10 minutes, sir." As Marcus ended the call, the realization began to dawn on the crowd. Whispers started spreading. Did he say Hamilton? As in Hamilton Enterprises? The billionaire Marcus Hamilton? Madison's live stream was exploding with comments as her followers began to piece together what was happening. Her viewer count was skyrocketing, but for all the wrong reasons. Instead of going viral for exposing a scammer, she was about to go viral for being part of a massive case of mistaken identity. David approached Marcus cautiously. His earlier confidence completely evaporated. Sir, if you're really... we had no way of knowing. Of knowing what? Marcus asked, his voice quiet but carrying an edge of steel. Of knowing that you should treat all customers with basic respect? Of knowing that someone's appearance doesn't determine their worth? Of knowing that humiliating people for entertainment is wrong? Sarah had come out from behind the counter, her face a mixture of terror and disbelief. Mr. Hamilton, the card was declined, and I thought, you were dressed. I was dressed like a human being having a rough morning, Marcus said. And instead of compassion, instead of giving me the benefit of the doubt, you chose cruelty. You chose to make me a spectacle for your amusement. The cafe doors opened, and Janet Morrison hurried in, her professional composure barely concealing her panic. At 45, she'd built her career on maintaining the highest standards across Hamilton Enterprises restaurant properties. The thought that her boss, one of the most powerful men in American business, had been mistreated at one of their locations was her worst nightmare come to life. Mr. Hamilton, she said breathlessly, I came as soon as I could. What happened here? Marcus gestured towards Sarah and David. Your employees declined to serve me because my credit card had a temporary glitch. Instead of handling the situation professionally, they chose to publicly humiliate me, encourage a crowd to mock me, and ultimately ask me to leave the premises. Janet's face hardened as she turned to face her employees. Is this true? David stammered. He looked, and the card was declined. We get a lot of people trying to what? Janet's voice was ice cold. Try to buy coffee? Since when is that a crime? Ma'am, Sarah interjected, her voice shaking. We didn't know who he was. He was dressed like someone who deserved basic human decency. Marcus asked, because that's all I was asking for. I wasn't demanding special treatment because of who I am. I just want to be treated like a human being. Zoe, who had been watching the exchange with wide eyes, suddenly spoke up. Are you really a billionaire? She asked Marcus with the directness that only children possess. Marcus knelt down to her level again, his expression softening completely. I am. But you know what? That doesn't matter. What matters is what you did today. You showed more wealth, real wealth, than anyone else in this room. He stood up and addressed the crowd that was still watching in stunned silence. I want everyone here to understand something. The little girl who offered her lunch money to help a stranger, she's richer than all of us combined, because she has something that money can't buy, a kind heart. Janet had been taking notes throughout the conversation, her expression growing grimmer by the moment. Mr. Hamilton, I want to assure you that this kind of behavior is absolutely unacceptable and not representative of our company values. There will be immediate consequences for everyone involved. I'm sure there will be, Marcus said. But right now, I want to do something else. He turned to Zoe's mother, Lisa, who had been watching the entire scene unfold with a mixture of pride and amazement. Ma'am, would you mind if I spoke with you for a moment? Lisa approached cautiously, still processing what had just happened. Of course, Mr. Hamilton. Your daughter showed remarkable character today. In a room full of adults who forgot how to be decent human beings, she remembered what really matters. I'd like to do something to honor that. Marcus pulled out his phone and made another call. Carol, it's Marcus. I need you to set up a college fund immediately. Yes, full scholarship, tuition, room and board, everything. The beneficiary is Zoe Washington. I'll send you the details. Zoe looked up at her mother, confused by the adult conversation happening around her. Mama, what's a college fund? Lisa was crying now, overwhelmed by the sudden turn of events. It means, baby, that your kindness today just changed our whole future. But Marcus wasn't done. He turned to address the entire cafe, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to commanding attention. I want everyone here to understand what happened today. You saw someone who looked different from you, someone who appeared to be struggling, and instead of offering help, you offered humiliation. You turned someone else's moment of difficulty into entertainment. Madison, still holding her phone but no longer actively streaming, felt the weight of his words. Her followers were already beginning to turn on her, sharing screenshots of her mocking comments and demanding accountability. That young woman, Marcus continued, pointing toward Madison, live-streamed my humiliation to thousands of people. She encouraged cruelty for clicks, for followers, for a few moments of viral fame. That's not influence. That's exploitation. Madison's phone had been buzzing nonstop with notifications, but she was afraid to look at them. Her follower count was indeed climbing, but the comments were overwhelmingly negative. Brand partnerships she'd been negotiating were already sending messages of concern. Her moment of viral fame was quickly becoming a viral disaster. Janet had finished her notes and turned to David and Sarah. You are both suspended immediately, pending a full investigation. Please gather your belongings and leave the premises. Mrs. Morrison, David pleaded. Please, I have a family to support. I was just trying to protect the business. If you'd known what? Marcus interrupted. If you'd known I was wealthy, you would have treated me differently? Don't you see the problem with that thinking? Sarah was crying now, the reality of her situation finally sinking in. Mr. Hamilton, please, I'm just trying to get through law school. I made a mistake, but I can't lose this job. I'll do anything. You'll do anything except treat people with basic respect? Marcus asked. The time to show character was when you thought I was powerless, not now when you know I'm not. The crowd that had been so eager to participate in his humiliation was now desperately trying to blend into the background. Conversations were hurried and hushed as people gathered their belongings and headed for the exits, hoping to escape before they too became part of the accountability. But Marcus wasn't finished with his lesson. I want everyone who's still here to understand something, he said, his voice carrying across the cafe. I did reveal who I was to get revenge, though I certainly could have. I revealed it to make a point. Everyone deserves dignity, regardless of their circumstances. The person you mock today might be your boss tomorrow, or your judge, or your doctor. But more importantly, they're a human being deserving of basic respect. He turned back to Zoe, who was still holding her lunch money and watching the adult drama with fascination. Sweetheart, would you like to help me with something? Zoe nodded enthusiastically. I'm going to make sure that every child in your school district gets free lunch for the rest of the year. But I need your help to make sure we do it right. Will you be my consultant? Zoe's eyes widened. What's a consultant? It's someone who helps make important decisions. And you've already shown me that you make better decisions than most adults. Lisa was still trying to process everything that had happened. In the span of 30 minutes, her daughter's simple act of kindness had resulted in a full college scholarship and apparently a significant charitable donation to their community. Mr. Hamilton, she said, her voice trembling with emotion, I don't know how to thank you. Don't thank me, Marcus replied. Thank your daughter. She reminded me why I got into business in the first place, to help people, not to accumulate power over them. Janet was coordinating with corporate security and legal teams, ensuring that the incident was properly documented and that appropriate actions were taken. But she also was making notes about policy changes that needed to be implemented immediately. Mr. Hamilton, she said, I want to assure you that we'll be implementing new training programs across all our locations. This will never happen again. I hope not, Marcus said. But more than that, I hope people remember that character isn't about how you treat those who can help you. It's about how you treat those who can't. As the cafe began to empty out, with people eager to distance themselves from the unfolding consequences, Marcus found himself alone with Zoe, Lisa, and Janet. The contrast between the hostile crowd from earlier and the quiet dignity of this moment was striking. Zoe, Marcus said, kneeling down one more time, I want you to remember something. What you did today, offering your lunch money to help someone you thought needed it. That's what real wealth looks like. That's what true success means. Zoe smiled up at him. My mama always says that being rich isn't about money. It's about having enough to share. Your mama is a very wise woman, Marcus said, glancing at Lisa with respect. And she's raising a remarkable daughter. As they prepared to leave, Marcus turned back to the cafe one final time. The gleaming surfaces and expensive fixtures seemed hollow now, lacking the warmth that could only come from genuine human connection. In the weeks that followed, the story of what happened at Meridian Cafe spread far beyond Atlanta. Madison's live stream had been saved and shared millions of times, but not for the reasons she'd hoped. Instead of becoming famous for exposing a scammer, she became infamous for participating in the public humiliation of a billionaire who was simply trying to buy coffee. The fallout was swift and severe. Brand partnerships were canceled. Followers began leaving in droves, and her reputation in the influencer community was permanently damaged. More importantly, she was forced to confront the ugly reality of what she'd become, someone who profited from others' pain. Sarah and David faced their own reckonings. Both lost their jobs and found it difficult to find new employment once the story became public. But perhaps more significantly, they were forced to examine their own prejudices and the assumptions they'd made about people based on appearance. For Marcus, the incident became a turning point. He implemented new policies across all his businesses, focusing on dignity and respect for all customers regardless of their circumstances. He also established the Zoe Washington Foundation, dedicated to teaching empathy and kindness to children and adults alike. But the most profound change was in how he saw his own wealth and power. The little girl who had offered her lunch money had reminded him that true richness came not from what you accumulated, but from what you were willing to give. 6 months later, Marcus returned to Meridian Cafe. The location had been transformed, not just in terms of decor, but in atmosphere. The new staff had been trained extensively in customer service and dignity, and the cafe had become known as one of the most welcoming places in Atlanta. As he sat at the same table where Zoe and Lisa had been that fateful morning, Marcus reflected on the lesson he'd learned. In a world obsessed with appearances, with social media metrics, with the accumulation of wealth and status, it had taken an 8-year-old girl to remind him of the most important truth of all. Kindness is the only currency that matters. Compassion is the only wealth that multiplies when shared. And dignity, the simple recognition of someone else's humanity, is the foundation upon which all true success is built. Where are you watching from today? I'd love to hear your thoughts on Zoe's incredible act of kindness in the comments below. Have you ever witnessed someone being treated unfairly because of their appearance? What did you do about it? Remember, we all have the power to change someone's day, and sometimes their entire life. With a simple act of compassion, be like Zoe. Choose kindness over cruelty, empathy over judgment, and love over indifference. In a world that often rewards the loudest voice, the most followers, or the biggest bank account, let's not forget that the richest person in any room is usually the one with the biggest heart. If this story moved you, please like this video and subscribe for more incredible true stories of human kindness and justice. And most importantly, go out into the world and be the change you want to see. Because in the end, no matter how much money you have, no matter how many followers you've gained, no matter how successful you appear to be, humanity remains priceless. And kindness? Kindness is the only true currency that never loses its value.